Right then folks, here she is in all her glory, the FTO. She's still absolutely with us and we're still enjoying her. We've been busy, we've been secretly doing some track days. Now we haven't really done any filming, so we've got some lovely scenic shots for you here. We've been buying tyres, some nice Federal RSR grippies. We found a little bit of understeer, so we've decided we're going to do a few upgrades. So here's some footage of the upgrades and we'll chat about what else we've been doing later on in the video. Right cats, so here we go. Here's the standard rad. Just turn it round. You'll see, I mean, for a track car, not a wise move. Definitely a good investment to go and get a new rad. And Natalie spent a bit of cash and she's got this lovely piece of kit. Now, point to note, by the way, whilst we're chatting about this, this was sold on eBay as a Jap Speed rad, 40mm enhanced cooling alloy rad. And it arrived and it came in a box with slightly different branding on it, with Derenza on it. That's something extremely loud in the background, bloody hell. And it's got a Derenza logo down here. Now this looks exactly the same as a Jap Speed rad. It is branded differently on the top and on the side. Same thing, you know, essentially does the same job. I believe Derenza is I think it's a UK brand, which makes parts mainly for European cars. But we've got an FTO rad. So I've taken that bad boy out. We've already got electric fans on this. I'm not sure if I filmed that before, but I had the SPAL from E36 in the garage. I bought a cheapy 12 volt one. I just wired in the plugs from the Mitsubishi on the end of the wires, and they work perfectly well. They're a bit quieter than the Mitsubishi electric fans, but old knackered ones. So we've got a big hole in the engine bay here where I'm going to be putting that new rad. Hopefully it's going to go in, but it's aftermarket, so we'll have a little mess around. Eagle-eyed will spot. We've also got some braked up pipe work because we've got bumpers, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Whilst I'm in here, I'm doing an oil and filter change. Oil filter's loose. Down there is a sandwich plate that you might just be able to make out with an oil pressure gauge that I've never been able to get to work. Apart from that, this marring here was from the old fans, so one of the reasons I changed them was to get rid of problems like that ever happening again, and it gives us a lot more space in the engine bay. So I'm going to get that rad in and then button it up, and I'll show you what she looks like when she's in there. FTO track prep, mate, continues. Right, so we're done, and let me say, that Derenza rad, piece of cake to fit, man. Really well made. Let's just show you. Went in like a glove. Probably the hardest bit was putting the cable ties on my rad fans, but that's bespoke to this car. If you've got standard rad fans, I'm pretty sure they'll bolt onto these bosses fairly well, because the fit is lovely. This bracket here, no problem whatsoever. This one here, a little bit high up. The rad is obviously slightly taller here. You can just about see the rubber bung being squished out just a tiny fraction there. So, it's millimetres, man, you know, I wouldn't worry about that. It's still a really good fit. I'm really happy with it. All coolant pipes obviously fitted perfectly well. Talking of which, 1.3 litres extra coolant so far. I've not driven it yet. It may need a bit more topping up, but you're definitely going to need more coolant because it's a bigger capacity rad. Oil is in, oil filter's on, oil pressure gauge. Now then, don't buy cheap Chinese shite. Bought cheap Chinese gauge. Doesn't work, never has worked, can't get it to work, forget it. I'm not going to waste my time. Any of you who've seen my BMW videos, you probably won't be able to make this out on camera, but down in there somewhere is a TIM oil pressure gauge. It uses a capillary from the block. I'm going to do that. It's much easier than this. I've already got a sandwich plate in there, so all I've got to do is get the gauge and join it all up, stick it into the dash, holes in the dash already. So there we go, rad is in, oil pressure gauge is looked at and dealt with. Made a decision. Only thing I've got to get now, I think, I'm going to say to Natalie, we probably need a new rad cap because that's looking pretty tired, but we've got nice new Fuchs oil in there, a couple more things to come. Let's see what's next. Today we're putting some BC Racing RM coilovers on. Yeah, man. What, it's a piece of piss taking the shocks out? Yeah, it's easy. Especially if you're changing them for coilovers that have already got the springs on and everything. So it literally is just a bit of, you know, just pull one out, put a new one in. So we've got the bottom bolts undone, the drop link undone the brake pipe with a little sort of slidey thing that holds it together. Little sort of spring clip. 3 nuts at the top. Strut brace, I'm hoping we'll be able to just pry up a little bit, otherwise I'll take the nuts off the other side. I've left the nuts on the top just so the whole unit doesn't fall down on me. I've just knocked my toolbox over, it's not the end of the world. There we go. Right, so this is the standard shock unit. We're swapping this bad boy out with this giant Eibach spring here, which I think has got 3.5 kilograms spring rate and a 30mm drop. For the BCs, which I think are 11 kilograms spring rate, and obviously adjustable drop, adjustable dampening, proper adjustable drop with the actual cup that screws onto the bottom of the shock absorber. So we're gonna kind of guess the ride height to begin with, obviously, and then stick it on and see what we reckon it looks like. It's pretty much as it came out of the factory, we think. So what we've done with the shocks is we've greased up all the threads where the cups go on and where all the adjustment nuts sit on, just to try and mitigate any kind of corrosion that's going to happen once it goes in the car. Even though the car's not going to be driven on the road much, it's, you know, I don't want to be mucking around with £1,000 coilovers and trying to free up the locking nuts. So last bit to come off is the drop link. That then leaves us this entire unit that is going to go to the side. Sadly, these top mounts were changed recently. I think we're going to try and take them off and sell them. There's your standard front, there's your new front, and I would say that that is a bloody huge drop to begin with. One of the things that I've read on the BC instruction sheet, which we've got here, is on this McPherson type strut, this whole cup here is going to move up and down the shock, but I've got to leave 80mm worth of thread inside here to be safe. The shock body itself is 130mm, right, so that means that I can take off 50mm, which is 2 inches maximum. The only other thing that we can't account for is because of the different spring rates, this is going to compress loads more than this is under the weight of the car, right? So although it looks like it's dramatically shorter, once this is on the car, the spring rate on this is so much more, the car's not going to sort of slouch down on the suspension as much. So I would assume with this old Eibach unit, it probably like compresses down, like let's say it compresses down 3 times as much as this does. You're going to think I'm crazy here, but I'm going to say let's put them on like this and see how ridiculously low it is, and then we'll wind them out once they're on the car, alright? Because to actually adjust it when it's on the car, you leave it bolted in here, right? You undo this nut here and I can wind the whole shock body out like this. See what I'm doing here? It does tell you to do one side at first, but I'm more comfortable because I've never put coilovers on a car before, doing both the fronts and then I'll do both the rears. I think that's going to be more work because I'm going to have to do more adjusting, but I'd rather do that and then I can get it even over the axles first, rather than have the whole car sitting at like an angle front to back. Do you know what I mean? If I can get the fronts and the backs so I'm dealing with just rake rather than yaw, then I'd be happy. It's alright.
It's alright. Quite right.
Oh,
what?
Stiff, man.
What?
That is stiff. I can barely
Jesus
push down
Christ.
on it.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so out comes the rear shock absorber assembly. I believe the springs on this again are Eibach springs, lowering kit springs, 2.8 kilograms spring rate, 30mm drop like the fronts. There it is next to the lovely BC coilover, and this time we got slightly less difference. This one has got a 9 kilogram spring rate, obviously adjustable ride height, adjustable damping, we'll worry about that later. I believe also this has got a spherical bearing in the bottom of it, so it doesn't have a rubber bush like the stock unit. So we've taken 20mm out the rear end and we're going to drop it down and see what it looks like now. What do you think, how it be? Okay. It's just, it's got no fucking springs. It feels solid, man. We think we're happy with that. Level looks pretty good. Damping settings, it's got 30-way adjustable damping settings. We've gone halfway. Play it safe. Not feeling like a gambling man. We're going to go and take it for a run now and see what it feels like. So, as you can see, we have changed a radiator and we've put some coilovers in the car, and then we took it to a test day at Croft. First and foremost, I'll say, bloody hell, man. The car ran amazingly well. Natalie and I were really chuffed with the way it handled and the way it felt, and the upgrades that we did were good. You know, we were happy. Along with the shock absorbers and the radiator, as you can see, was necessary because of the state of the old one, and the shock absorbers were an endeavour to try and get better handling out of the car. So another thing we did with the car is we put on a new anti-roll bar, a white line anti-roll bar from, well, it's essentially the same as a GPVR 20mm anti-roll bar, rear one I'm talking about here. That is sort of trying to push the car towards wanting to oversteer more than understeer and give it a little bit more stiffness at the back. And in tandem with that, I also did some new lower control arms. We got some polybushed, you know, fancy bollocks Chinesium lower control arms that are reasonably well made, to be fair. And that kind of stiffened up all the back end to try and get rid of some of that understeer, which seems to have worked. Along with that, I did some trailing arm bushes, but they're just boring replacement stuff. So how did it help? What did it do? What does the car feel like? Well, to put it as clearly as we can, I think the car feels amazing on the turn-in now. It feels like a car possessed as it goes around the corners. Literally, you just whack the steering wheel around and it will turn like it's on rails, man, literally. So, I mean, point number one, we definitely got the turn-in way better, and we definitely cured a lot of the understeer. It felt a lot at Brands Hatch like it just wanted to wash out going around corners. It now feels like the back end wants to overtake the front end, but in a kind of stable, sort of predictable way. So we had a few really good laps near the end of the afternoon. I took one of my friends out in the car, and he got some pretty sweaty palms pretty quickly, and I didn't really think I was driving that fast. So, you know, I'm not the best pedaler in the world, but I felt confident enough to throw the car around. It did have some downsides though. We found the BCs to have a kind of oscillation problem going over, mainly over undulations in the road. So we think that might be a part of a problem with alignment. I'll get to that in a bit. But also, it feels like it's something to do with the setup of the shocks. Maybe the way they're fitted, maybe the preload on the springs, maybe the dampening. The dampening, we've kind of played around with all sorts of different settings, softer at the rear, harder at the front, and in different increments, all the way hard, all the way soft. And no matter what we do, it seems to oscillate in some way or other. Now, we're in touch with BC Racing right now to see if we can get some answers to that. We might have a play around with the preload, but it's not really, the kind of shocks we've got don't really want to have a lot of preload on them because they're the kind that you move the entire bottom of the body of the shock to adjust the ride height. Therefore, you're not really playing with preload. Anyway, I won't go into the finalities of that. I made a bit of a cock up, partly because I'm a donkey, and partly because of coronavirus. We can use coronavirus these days to explain anything. When I got the alignment done, without going into too many details, I gave my instructions to one of the technicians, sent him on his way, and the car came back, and we drove it away and found that it had far too much camber on the back end. Long story short, I'd forgotten about the static camber that it gained when we lowered the car, and we lowered it a lot. Yes, hand up there, I made a bit of a cock up. When we got to the track day, the best thing that we could do was to try and reduce the rear camber by kind of like the maximum amount, and try and even it up. So we ended up with about 3 degrees of camber on the back and 3 on the front. That's kind of too much on the back. You don't want that much in a front wheel drive car. So one of the things going forwards we might have to think about is adjustable camber arms for the rear of the car so we can straighten those rear wheels up a little bit. At the moment, especially on a road, it feels kind of like the car wants to almost steer itself, and it's pretty disconcerting, to be honest. On a track it's not so bad, but I do think that we could aid a little bit more of that rear end sort of stability by getting better camber alignment. The only other thing that we really are concerned about on the track day, apart from a lack of power, because it always needs more power, is brakes. We've tried really hard to get the brakes sorted on this car. Now, they are just standard units, there's nothing special about them, but we've got Project Mu pads in the front, which are really, really good pads, and way better than what we had before. We found out 2 days before the track day that the front brakes were binding. I decided to give the car a once over and found that they were sticky, so I ended up buying 2 new calipers and a rebuild kit. The rebuild kit came first, so the front calipers got completely rebuilt. They worked perfectly well, but the problem we've got is we seem to get brake fade really quickly in the track days. So to give an example, we go out and we do maybe 5 laps, and then the brakes just seem to plateau out and we lose a lot of braking force. They remain the same for the rest of the day. So that's quite frustrating because we kind of feel like there's more braking there to be had. Now, neither Natalie and I are particularly heavy on the brakes, I don't think, but you want the confidence to be able to stamp on them. And the horrible thing is that you get like the first 5 laps of the day, the brakes feel amazing. And then they just slightly take a step down and they sort of sit there for the rest of the day. We also get a little bit of wobble, a little bit of vibration coming through the pedal later on as it get really hot. So one of the things we've tried to do to cure that is buy a late spec facelift front bumper, which has got 2 holes in the front. So we don't need fog lights, so I've taken them out and I've tried to make some rudimentary brake ducts to try and force a bit more air towards the calipers. It looked pretty good. I would give it a 5 out of 10 for effort, but it didn't really make much difference, if I'm perfectly honest. I think if I'm going to be messing around trying to make brake ducts, they've got to go on the back of the brake dust shields, and that's a whole load of fabrication that I haven't really, got my teeth into yet. So big brakes are probably something that's got to come up on the cards fairly soon. So moving forwards with the car, we're happy. It's running great. We've got a smaller steering wheel, which makes a big difference. The old one from my BMW, I've got a bigger one for that car, and this one feels great. We got a new knob. We've got a nylon knob on the gear shifter. It sounds silly, but it makes a big difference actually to the way it feels on track. Your hand wraps around it quite well. So we've got a few things that we are really happy with, and a few things that we need to improve. We definitely need to improve brakes. We've got to sort out this oscillation. And then one thing I've not mentioned that we are both extremely happy with, but I have a little concern about, is we have got limited slip differential in this gearbox now, and we've got a drive shaft, which I'm not happy with the way the inboard CV joint actually fits into the gearbox, into the differential. It moves around a lot. Now, we've done 2 track days on it, and we've not had a problem with it, but we get a vibration on acceleration sometimes. And from my point of view and a kind of engineering perspective, it just doesn't feel right. So it's something I want to investigate in the car. I want to get to the bottom of it and see if there's an improvement we can make. If not, we'll run with it until it breaks. We've got spares, shit happens, but I'd like to see if we can find a solution. So there you go, we're back. The FTO is back. It never went away. We've just been lazy and not been filming enough for you. Hopefully this wets your whistle and gives you a little bit of an idea that we're not forgotten about it in any shape or regard. And we've got more videos coming up on it. We are going to finish off the series of gearbox videos, and we've got plenty more planned. So stick with us. Thank you always to the FTO guys that watch these videos. You're the guys that really started this channel and grew with me, and I hope I can keep providing content which helps any of you out there which are playing around with these old Mitsubishis. I suppose that's it for now, guys. Before we lose the light, I'm going to say thanks for watching, like and subscribe and all that bollocks. And for now, it's Pamo out.